So how you been?
I'm doing good. The tables, how the tables,
Now you know
how
how
the
it feels.
turntables.
How the turntables. Haley and I use that all the time. That phrase. That's such a great bit. How the turntables. That's good. So you do play pond hockey? That's kind of interesting.
Well,
remember you saying
pickup
yeah.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Go out and
I'm not good at it or anything, but
no one. I play with a lot of people who aren't good at it either.
yeah.
We're all not good at it. I got my charity game coming up.
Yeah.
Remember that? See that giant?
Oh, you have a big Michael Scott check.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna do a check presentation
Mm-hmm.
before the game. Thus far, we have raised $3,700.
Wow, it's not bad.
Yeah, yeah. So excited about that, and I got Ryan Carter, who used to play in the NHL. He's a Stanley Cup champion. He's now the analyst for the Wild Games. He does the color TV.
Uh-huh.
He's gonna do the celebrity puck drop, so that'll be really cool. And I found someone to sing the national anthem ahead of the game. So we're gonna
Wow.
blow it out.
Yeah. So what's on your mind these days?
Yeah, a lot is on my mind. I'm glad you asked. It's been a very busy week. I don't know. I'm just been pretty stressed out, which is typical, but been super, super busy with work stuff. And it's just been kind of a lot. Doing a lot of new business development, which is basically me just
Putting yourself out there.
knocking on doors,
Yeah.
sending out emails to complete strangers. And I think that is very exhausting work for me.
Mm.
And the amount of rejection you get is just so exhausting. So it's every day I'm well, okay. How many people are either going to ignore me or send me some leave me alone note?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's been, I think, honestly, it's so funny because I can tell when I'm stressed out because there are 3 reactions I have.
Mm-hmm.
The first of which is my appetite. I don't eat as much.
Oh. Uh-huh.
A second is it's really hard for me to get out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
My sleep pattern's messed up. And then the third is just I find myself getting more and more irritable and short with people, cranky at people and wanting to snap, call people out on their stuff. And I've noticed those 3 picking up. It's so funny because every time it's like Groundhog Day. Anytime I'm feeling those things, I stop and I'm oh, I must be pretty stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's and it's super specific the way it manifests itself. For example, my appetite. I have a shake I make every morning.
Yeah.
And I know I'm stressed because I'll be I can't drink this. I don't want to drink it. I don't want to make it.
So you don't even make it.
No, I sit on the couch and I pout for 20, 30 minutes. And even today when I was I got to eat lunch, I get in this mood where I'm I wish I could just take a pill and not have to eat any meals. Yes.
Nutriented.
2,500 calories, vitamins A, B, and D. I don't know what you need, but
Yeah.
I get like that. I just don't want to eat. I don't want to I don't feel like eating anything. And it's really hard for me. I'll hit the snooze way more on my alarm.
And so how long does it take before you do that internal kind of oh, this is what's happening. These are my telltale signs of stress.
Usually a week.
Oh, you'll do that for a week? And then
Yeah.
you'll be oh, I've been in this hole for a week and this is why I must be stressed.
Yeah. It takes me probably about a week to realize what's going on, which I don't know.
Does it take other people around you?
No one really says
they
anything.
quicker?
I don't know. What do you mean? Quick to notice it?
People in your daily life, are they noticing quicker than you are?
No one's ever said anything.
You need
Haley,
an early detection system.
Yeah, right. Hey, maybe I could get a support dog that'd smell it,
Yeah.
sniff it, and be oh, he's going through it. No, Haley's never said anything, but I think she can kind of maybe sometimes tell. I haven't been. I don't think I've been too short with her. But I'm just way less tolerant of other people's annoying me, I guess.
Uh-huh.
It's just like this, for example, if I'm at work and someone comes in and starts talking to me, I'm just like, either you say something interesting or get out, because I just don't have the patience to
You don't say that to them.
No, but that's what I feel. That's what I'm thinking in my head.
Do you think they can detect it?
I hope not. I feel bad if they do. I'm sure they do. Who knows? I feel bad about that.
Yeah, my kids tell me that if what they have, like on a phone call, they'll be like, on a phone call, we know we have to get right to the point because he's not going to last very long if it's not interesting to him.
About you?
About me.
That gives me so much insight as this podcast, right? This is you sitting on the other side of me. It all makes sense. Probably like this is your worst nightmare is listening to my vicissitudes.
You
Get to the point, Alex.
Step it up, Alex.
Yeah.
Give me something I can.
I feel like that a lot, but I think where I get more triggered is when I feel like people are just coming to talk at me as opposed to having a conversation with me.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to that. And so when I'm in this irritable state, it's like, dude, you just want someone to listen to you. I don't have the capacity to do this right now. Please go away. And I think, yeah, it's just, we talked about this a few times, right? This idea of the new year and sort of those shoulds.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is tied to just the fact that I'm building a business and there's a lot of hard kind of gritty work involved. It's not like complicated or like very challenging mentally work, but it's just required. It's kind of just like a gauntlet. And it's like, it's hard to wake up in the morning and be like, oh, okay, another beautiful day. There's no sun because it's cloudy in Minnesota and I'm going to the gauntlet for 10 hours.
Yeah, Gauntlet doesn't sound like an inviting.
No.
There was there was an old Clint Eastwood movie called The Gauntlet.
Okay.
And he was transporting somebody and he had this bus that was all fortified and he had to get through basically everybody shooting at him, trying to kill him. So that's what I think of. I think of that every time I hear the word gauntlet. It's like, this is not going to be fun.
How I explain it to people, how I feel is like, it's like waking up and then every day, a couple times a day, someone just starts kicking you in the shins.
Okay.
And that's it's just like getting kicked in the shins. Sometimes I use it different, getting kicked somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what it's like. It just, and I think that's a running theme through a lot of my work, my creative work and stuff like that. I put stuff out there a lot, put myself out there a lot. And I think sometimes a side effect of that is you just get kicked in the shins a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've been,
Well, and it's creative work that you're doing. It's not somebody's taxes where there are all these rules and spreadsheets and things like that. But it's your heart, right? You put your heart out there, and then to feel like they get stepped on, it's tough to say, hey, guess what I get to do today? I get to throw my heart out there.
You get to get kicked in the shins 50 times
step
today.
on it. Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to sound dramatic in the sense that like I'm putting my heart out there, because sometimes the work is pretty like business-like or corporate, or it's not a reflection of my innermost thoughts and desires and wants. But with that said, I always do like apply some of my perspective. Sure. Whenever I'm writing something or coming up with an idea, it's like it's a little piece of me. And even like this charity hockey game and stuff like that, like all that is a reflection of what I care about, and I want people to be interested in it, and I want people. Excuse me. So I want people to be excited about it, and it sucks. And I think the therapeutic moments for me are just being able to like talk about it, because I don't have a lot of people with whom I can talk about it, just because a lot of people in my bubble do such different types of work.
Yeah,
so they're like, what do you mean? Like, do you have a bad day at the office? Do you not get your spreadsheet done in time? Or it's like, no, I had a bad day at the office because it feels like someone kicked me in the shins, my heart shins.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Haley, I feel bad for Haley because I vent to her, sometimes like, hey, this sucks. I'm going through this. And it's hard. I think it's challenging for her to understand it, but she wants to help. So she feels like pressure to know what to say. We've talked about this before.
Yeah. You and I, or she and Haley?
Yeah, Haley and I. We talked about it, and she's told me, like, I sometimes feel a lot of pressure to fix it for you, and I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
Which I definitely appreciate that, and I feel for her there. Because there are times where she could probably tell, I'm like, you better fix this, because I am cranky. And it's usually after those moments where I start to reflect and be like, wow, yeah, it's not very realistic.
Yeah.
Well, you and I have talked about that very idea of like, you can't expect other people. It's not other people's job to make you feel better.
Right. They can, but it's not their job.
Yeah. And I definitely, do you think it's do you think there are a lot of people who assume it's other people's jobs to make them feel better? Or is that something you think you come across rarely?
Do I think there are people who assume it's their job to make
assume it's other people's jobs to make them feel better?
Yeah, I'll bet that's out there.
Okay. Because that's definitely, I don't know how I developed that, but I definitely think it's a thing that I have. Where
I think it's a revelation for some people to think, I'm in charge of my own happiness.
Okay, yeah.
That's a revelation for some people. That was a revelation for somebody I met with today.
Really?
And I said, it's not your job to make your wife happy. It's not her job to make you happy. You have to find happiness. And every now and then you can make each other happy, but it's not your job and your sole purpose.
It's definitely a hard thing for whatever reason. Maybe it's because it sometimes takes hard work to make yourself happy. It takes responsibility and accountability, and it's a lot easier to deflect for me to be like, I don't want to deal with my problems. Can you make me feel better, please?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the last week has been a little stressful, and a lot of should thoughts and a lot of thoughts of like, hey, you suck at this. You're not doing a good job. And it just can get exhausting. It's like, dude, doing the best we can. It's like, yep, I know. But do better. Do better. But there's other good stuff too. So just take the good with bad. So that's where I'm at.
I listened to one of our podcasts. I don't listen to the podcast typically.
I know, you told me that.
I kind of feel like I lived through it. So
don't need to revisit it.
But I listened to the one where I was not involved.
Yeah.
The only one. And I was surprised you said, yeah, sometimes he says things that make me mad. And I'm like, okay, so why don't you say something to me about that? Like if I say something that pisses you off or ticks you off, you're allowed to push back and say, I don't see it that way. Or I'm mad that you're not seeing it the way I see it, Dr. Harris, or whatever.
I think most people would agree that when you're it's not easy to say that. For me personally, it's hard for me to say something like, hey, you're pissing me off.
Yeah.
Because I'm worried that they are going to be really offended or like take it personally. And I think that's just because that's sort of the world I grew up in, was like, if you expressed how you were, if you expressed any kind of, hey, I didn't like this.
Yeah.
It would be like, well, that's a personal attack kind of a thing. So, and George and I talk about this a lot because he works hard to get me to communicate that. Like, are you mad at me right now? And I'll be like, he's like, tell me whatever you say, the worst thing that you could possibly think of right now. And, yeah. So that's something I work on, I struggle with. Yeah.
Like I see it as being related to just being able to check in with how you're thinking and feeling at a moment in time, whether it's angry, sad, hurt, lonely, scared, frustrated, whatever. It's emotions are just kind of barometers for how we're, what kind of experience we're having.
I agree. And I think there's just fear of communicating. Yeah. It's hard to express emotions to people because you don't know how they're going to respond. Sometimes you're worried that they're going to get mad at you. you worried that they're going to get their feelings hurt. I think I worry that people are going to be hurt by it.
Yeah.
So, and it's like, for our instance, right, if there was a time where you said something where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe Dr. Steve is, I don't want to say something and then you feel like you have, like it gets defensive. You know, that's what my fear would be.
You don't want me to get defensive.
Correct. I don't want it to feel like, oh, he's coming at me now.
Yeah. Because I have to justify my position or whatever. Yeah.
I have had therapists where it's like it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And it's because in the first session I would push back a little bit and it was like it would be met with a little bit of defensiveness. Like that's definitely a thing that all people deal with. And
yeah.
I've had experiences where it was like, whoa, okay. I think I touched a nerve there. I got to backpedal.
Well, your therapist is human, right?
Yes.
So.
But it's a weird experience because we talked about this last session or 2 sessions ago, and you were like, "Hey, therapists are working through stuff just like everyone else."
Yeah.
And it's still weird to be in the position of being a patient, if you will.
Yeah.
And seeing the sort of quote unquote authority figure.
Yeah.
Sort of not lash out at you, but like get angry or I think seeing a therapist get like angry and defensive is unnerving a little bit for me.
Does that happen to you?
Yeah. Just twice, 2 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
were they getting angry at you specifically?
There was one where a woman was very upset with me and she told me, and she was like it was very confrontational.
Yeah.
And she kicked me out. She told me to leave. Which I kind of tell this story with delight in hindsight. It was like a proud moment for me.
Yeah.
That
like getting a substitute teacher expelled or something like that.
The sub kicked me out and he just kind of smirked. It's like a rookie, you know. But like with George, it took me a very long time to feel comfortable with saying, "Hey, dude, you're pissing me off." Because, and I still to this day have trouble saying that to him. But even though he's time and time again told me, it's just where you are emotionally. It has no reflection on me and who I am. Why would I take it personally? It's just your emotion. I'm like, yeah, I hear you say it, but what if I say something that really hurts your feelings or really pisses you off?
Yeah. Do you think oftentimes in therapy we talk about the power differential between the therapist and the client, that the therapist is more in charge of the time, the therapist is getting paid typically. You know, there's a lot of things that that mark that this is not an equal relationship. You tell me about your life. I don't necessarily tell you about my thoughts, fears, anxieties, and things like that. Does the power differential come into play with that?
I think so. Yeah. Because you're sort of like, well, we're not on equal footing.
No.
And
not at all.
I don't know if we're supposed to be. I'm not saying I'd like to be. I don't know what the right answer is there. But there definitely is sometimes there's a wall, and it's so fascinating because every therapist is different, and that's something I love about this podcast is, you know, I get to compare and contrast and stuff like that. But I think back of all the therapists I've had, and there definitely are types where like I want there to be that, I want you to feel like there's that difference between us, and I'm in control. And then I've had other therapists who are like, we are completely on. I will be 100% honest with you. I'll tell you about my life if you want to know. So, and I think I prefer the sort of more even one.
But it's an artificial relationship, right? There's intimacy that happens between the therapist and the client, but it's really a one-way. It's not, you know, it's expected you would open up to me. It's not expected that I would open up to you. So that automatically places some level of difference in...
Totally. And it's what's so kind of weird to think about. Like sometimes I've told George, it's like, the way I phrase it is like, I had to pay you to be sympathetic. I have to pay someone to be compassionate and empathetic about me, you know? And like, that's just, it feels weird saying that. And maybe that's a sort of snarky way of looking at the relationship, but it is peculiar. But I don't have a problem with any particular approach. I just have my preference.
Well, it's interesting that in our culture, that we do a therapy thing. There are a colleague of mine takes, I don't know if we've ever talked about this before, but takes students to Cambodia and Laos and Thailand. And she's taking her U of M students over there, and they're telling these village elders that they want, I want to be a therapist. And they're like, well, what's a therapist? And people come to you with their problem. They try to describe it. And they're like, oh, you want to be a shaman.
Yeah.
And there are, in other cultures, there are revered positions, and there are, it's like, oh yeah, for that thing, we have this woman over here who people go and talk to, and she's, she's a farmer by day, and then she does this stuff, and so, but we have this very different system here in the States, a medicalized version of helping.
It is
Mental
crazy.
health helping.
It's wild to think about it that way. And I mean, this isn't a one-to-one comparison, but kind of from what I've understood, some people are like, oh, you see a therapist? Like when I was growing up, it was the priest at the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Or my priest. And it is kind of not weird, but fascinating to consider that we have turned it into a profession, and you study, you study it and you get degrees in it.
Yep.
But all of that to say, when I did the solo podcast, I think what I brought that up just because I want people to know that it is okay to like push back, like you said.
Yeah. I've
told Haley after sessions with George, she was like, how was it with George? And I was like, oh, I told him he was pissing me off. And she was like, what? Like, really? And I wonder if there are people who are either in therapy currently or thinking about being a therapist, and they would never dream of being able to express sort of emotions of frustration with their therapists. And I think, yeah, it's totally kosher. Hopefully, it would suck to like open up and be like, I'm mad at you. I feel like you did this. And to have a therapist be like, that's on you. You're crazy. Stop.
Yeah.
That would feel bad.
Dismissive.
Yes. Yeah. That could really, I would feel bad if that were to happen to someone.
The interesting thing about therapy is that oftentimes the stuff that gets talked about is, this was happening between me and my partner. This was happening between me and my coworker. So the client is talking about all these other relationships. And then to talk about the immediacy of what's going on between you and your therapist. Like, hey, it feels like you're holding out on me. It feels like there's something you want to say, but you're holding back. Maybe you're afraid of it. Maybe you're worried about what I would do with it. Maybe you're going to hurt my feelings. And it's almost more acceptable or expected that the therapist would talk about, this is what I'm getting from you right now. But you don't hear a lot of people saying the other way, like the client saying, I think, Dr. Steve, I think you're nervous about what I'm going to tell you. I think you're reacting out of you don't know what to do with my real emotion because it involves you, and you're letting me down right now. Or I feel like you bastard, you dropped the ball here.
Yeah.
Well, you should have been more protective of me or something. Like
100%.
That doesn't happen as often.
No, it doesn't. And there have been times where I have, specifically the you bastard thought, I've had that in our session. No, I'm just kidding about the you bastard part. But there have been times where I've been like,
giving you permission to say it.
There have been times where, and I've talked to George about this, where it's like, I felt like I said something and I was met with a sort of like, okay, indifference, maybe not indifference, but I felt like, oh, maybe I had triggered something in Dr. Steve.
Yeah.
And that, even talking about it right now, makes me really uncomfortable, because I don't know. Again, it's this fear of like, what if this disrupts the relationship? What if it makes Dr. Steve not like me? And what if he makes him angry at me, and he knows all these things about me, and he's in this. Yeah.
It's huge.
It's totally.
And I think on the receiving end, when I've had clients do that, it's a little disarming, because that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah.
It's me asking those questions.
Yeah.
And so when I have a client who does it for me to be able to find the space to hold on to myself and say, this is not about me, but obviously I'm involved, and to also say, well, maybe it is about you, Steve.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to consider what Alex is saying to you right now. Like maybe you were kind of being a jerk to him, or like I think it's important for us not to forget our humanity, that we have bad days, we have fights with our spouses, we don't get enough sleep the night before,
I think it's totally wonderful too to hear that, and like to me that just speaks to this notion of trust. You have to risk to trust is what you there's no trust without risk.
Trust without risk. No safety without risk.
What you said, and it sort of speaks to that, where it's like that's how you build. It's how you figure out if the bridge is rickety or if the bridge is sturdy. It's by going out, and by going out on the bridge, that could be expressing how you feel, or it could be expressing how you feel about your therapist. It could be me expressing how I feel about something you say.
Yeah.
I also think it's kind of funny to think about how I had to wait until you weren't here to do a solo podcast to talk about it. It's like maybe that speaks to I just make an analogy of like I snuck off, and like hiding. I was like, Dr. Steve. But I didn't say. Did I say anything that?
I cried for hours.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean no, but I mean in this chair. In my therapist chair, I like to think that people are being open, honest, real with me. And my intellectual brain says, of course, they're not always going to be open and honest. Not everybody has that capacity or interest, and so that's necessarily limits the kind of relationship you can have if somebody's going to hold back.
Totally.
If I'm not playing with a full deck of cards. When we're talking about your life and stuff. So.
Yep.
But I also think that that's developmental. It's like the rickety bridge, right? You put your foot out and okay, it's going to hold me. And then I give a little bit more. And then I'm in the middle of the bridge and I'm maybe giving more trust.
I have a lot of experiences. I think if I were to take a guess, this feels true to me to say this, is I've put steps on rickety bridges before and the bridges have collapsed. And I think that has left upon me this idea, even though I've made a ton of progress, I'm super proud of it, super happy with it, I still see that bridge and I get flashbacks. The reason I don't share with you stuff outside of the limitations of this podcast, which we've discussed, sometimes I'm afraid to tell you how I feel. And that's a fear, that's me. It's just a fear that stems from who knows where, but the stuff I carry with me from my past.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that happens from the therapist side is you start the relationship. You don't know somebody that well. In your job, you're supposed to, quote unquote, care about people, but it's hard to care about people you don't know. Yeah. And then so when you start getting more of their story and your heart starts to get more knit to theirs and their things that they've been challenged with or struggled with, it's hard to maintain that balance of, like you're just a client to me. Yeah. You're just a patient that comes in and I give you a prescription. Something happens in the middle of therapy and toward the end of therapy, we call it, stages of therapy, where you start feeling more like this is somebody I really care about. This is somebody I love. This is another human being who's been courageous enough to share their struggles with me, and my heart is with them. And so there is a lot of intimacy that happens. Yes. And so you start seeing people not as a client, but this is a friend. And of course there's people in the therapy world who say, well, you've got to maintain your objectivity, which I think is a joke. I don't think we get objectivity. I don't think therapists are, as long as you're human, you're not going to be objective. You're going to have a subjective experience of every person who sits down in the chair. Is it a bit removed? Yeah, it's removed from your life, but it's a very subjective experience. So you tell me about things and I run it through my filters in my brain and all of my experiences, and I shoot out something to you that says this makes sense to me, this doesn't make sense to me. And but over time you develop a caring heart for other people, and not just because you're supposed to, but because you really care about them.
Yeah. And that reminds me of what we talked about a few sessions ago, where it's like the limitations of this podcast, right? Because there are things that I can't share just out of...
That you don't want to share.
Correct. Just out of the nature. Yeah, I have the capacity to share.
Right.
However, there would be consequences and repercussions that I have. Yeah. So on your end, you could be like, I imagine, be like, man, I really want to care about Alex and like Alex, but it's just, he's not giving me much, right? Like I'm not saying that is the case, but I'm sure it would be a lot different if I could share all of, me as opposed to the podcast approved
version.
Stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've talked offline about some of those things that you're like, I'm reluctant to go here, or I'm reluctant to name names, and I don't need to go down that road, and for the sake of this thing. And so, once again we come back to that place where we're like, so is this this is a different podcast because it is therapy. It's not about therapy. It is therapy, but it's also got some limitations.
Yes, 1,000,000%. And I'm sure that there will be a person who like takes this to the next level and really unfiltered names. All I'm sure maybe there are people who do it, but yeah, that's not my journey.
Yeah,
I'm not the super brave one. That's more of a well, I think this is a good place
be a good stopping place.
Wrap up our conversation. So, as always, Dr. Steve, your time is appreciated. Grateful for it. Don't think you're a bastard. Just want to make
it today or at this moment.
There's still time.
There's still time.
And to everyone out there, all of the people out there, stay happy. All right, see you.